Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to another What's Possible bite-sized session. I'm Martin. I'm the CEO of the Specialist Works, and really excited about what we've got to bring you today. As you know, if you've attended WP Bite-Size before, our aim is in 45 minutes to give you insight into innovations that you can put into action, things that are going to make a real difference to your world. And I think our speaker today has taken the brief to heart and is sharing all kinds of nickable insights and takeaways from the direct-to-consumer world. As things change around us, I think there's never been a time when it's been more important to really understand what's going on in the world as things change so fast around us, and what you can do about it. And if there's one sector that really understood how to tap into consumer habits and respond to them in a really timely way, then it's probably the direct-to-consumer market. So thank you as ever for giving us 45 minutes. We'll make sure it's the most valuable 45 minutes of your week, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to hand over to Mark, who'll be your host. And thanks again for joining us. All the best.
Thanks, Martin. I'm Mark Connolly, Client Success Director at the Specialist Works. And before I introduce Paul and his presentation today, just to remind everybody that you will be on mute and we can't see you, but this is an interactive platform. So please, please, please ask as many questions as you want through the interactive chat. And at the end of Paul's presentation, I will ask as many of those that we can get in the time available to us. So the format of today, Paul's going to present to us on nickable insights from DTC brands for about 25 minutes. And then we'll have questions and answers at the end from an interactive session. But please get those questions coming so that I can use that last 20 minutes productively. The second thing is that this is being recorded and the webinar will be available afterwards. But as always, the live sessions are where you can ask the interactive questions. So today's presenter, today's fireside chat is with Paul Frampton. Calero is the European President for Control versus Exposed, a marketing services consultancy and addressable media specialist. Paul is an experienced business leader and one of the UK's defining voices in disruption and marketing. He was previously CEO of the hospitality tech scale-up Tink Labs, scaling the business from 20 to 200 across EMEA. Prior to that, Paul was Group CEO for Havas Media Group, a 500 million billing, 900-person organisation. The Evening Standard newspaper in London included Paul in their Progress 1000 brand builders, while The Drum voted him the 5th most influential person in UK digital. Paul was also honoured with Twitter's Lifetime Achievement Award. He is an influencer on LinkedIn and Twitter with over 25,000 followers, and he also serves as chair of the youth group dedicated to improving job prospects for young people. An advocate, a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion, Paul is an advisor for women in marketing and was named one of Management Today's 30 male agents of change. So welcome, Paul. Thank you very much for taking the time today. I'll hand over to you on your presentation for nickable insights from DTC brands.
Thank you, Mark. Lovely introduction. I'd forgotten some of those things, so thank you for reminding me of them. I'm going to share my screen to start with, so I can just pull the presentation up. So unless anybody tells me otherwise, I'm assuming hopefully that you can see the screen. So I'm going to crack on with the presentation. As Martin said, I'm going to talk about nickable insights from the D2C world, and then I'm going to take some of the learnings that I have and our business has from the D2C world and talk about the kind of missing part of the funnel that I think is often not thought about, and then talk about how data and technology play a role in accelerating growth from a marketing perspective. As Mark kindly said, I run Control versus Exposed actually internationally now across Europe and Asia, and we do a lot of work with the D2C world. We do a lot of work with big FMCGs and retailers that are trying to think about how they restructure their business for growth in marketing, and we do a lot of work in the addressable space, everything through from programmatic all the way through to connected TV. So At the end of 2019, it was pretty obvious that D2C, direct to consumer, as I think everyone knows the term, was no longer a fad. There were, by that point, 97% of web users are actually aware of at least one or more D2C brands. 39% had purchased from one or more, and 10% had purchased from 5 or more. So we already had an environment where D2Cs were starting to really get traction. And then, of course, as we know, COVID-19 hit, and the prediction that was done in May 2020 by eMarketer is that physical retail will have declined by what is a quite significant 16% by the end of the year, which obviously has created an environment where D2C and e-commerce-led brands have been able to step in. 33% of Brits, when asked 1 month ago, said that they were purchasing more online than they had the previous month. And then if you look at the global landscape, nearly everybody that uses the internet uses to buy, which obviously wasn't the case even 5 years ago. And 80% of digital buyers actually now buy via mobile. So we were in a world even just a few years ago where people said, is this the year of mobile? Are people going to buy mobily? The reality is that quite a lot of people are buying every type of service or product via their mobile device without going on a desktop already. So the landscape is already prime for e-commerce, but this is only going to accelerate. And if you then look at, I guess, global behavior from a consumer perspective, you can see that if we go back to 2010, there was less than 10% of the global population were actually buying through the internet. By the time we get to the end of 2023, that will be 30%. And bear in mind, that takes into account very developing markets in areas like Africa, in areas like LATAM that have got much lower propensity. That's a pretty significant number when you look at the global population. And underneath, you'll all be familiar with looking at different media consumption numbers, but the average daily time spent with different media now has mobile, desktop, social media sitting at the top, with linear broadcast slipping and print and radio definitely slipping further down. They're still relevant, but we're seeing a lot of consumption, which has only increased during this lockdown as people turn to their laptops, their tablets and their mobile. So these things, I guess, we're all aware of. So they're just setting the scene. What you may not have seen is the insight that came out of the report I mentioned earlier, the eMarketer report, which shows that by the end of 2024, they predict that pretty much 1/3 of all retail will be e-commerce. If you look at the far left, at the end of 19, e-commerce was 22% of all retail. By the end of this year, it's predicted to have jumped up by over a quarter to be 28%. There'll be a little bit of a decline year on year, probably because some of the people that were forced into e-commerce in lockdown will revert to retail behavior. But then you start to see the lift growing year after year. And I would suggest that actually that's maybe even conservative, that you might see a bigger growth from 2022 through to 2024. And I picked out a quote from Jack Ma, the founder and CEO of Alibaba, which I think is a really pertinent one to think about as we think about direct to consumer as a proposition in e-commerce, which is that he thinks that pure e-commerce will soon be reduced to becoming the traditional business. So we used to be in a world where it was high street retail and then it was e-commerce. E-commerce is almost becoming the norm. And soon we will get this new retail area, which will be the growth area, which is where you see the integration of the physical retail world, the digital retail world, and logistics and data becomes the key determinant and the key differentiator across that proposition. So when to have physical touch points, when to have digital touch points, informed by data. And that data piece and the technology architecture is what direct to consumer brands do so well. And we're going to talk a lot about how that enables agility and enables the ability to spin up different types of capability and attract new audience personas and new audience cohorts much more quickly than brands that maybe don't have that predetermined kind of benefit. And it's worth saying that digital commerce increases the difficulty of winning customers and market share, because if you think about in the US, you have brands like Instacart and Peapods, which essentially allow you to, within an app, buy products from local shops, different shops, and put it into a basket and then get it delivered. With the likes of Ocado, Picnic, which is like Ocado out in the Netherlands, you essentially have online shopping businesses which are tech-led. They have distribution networks behind them, but ultimately what drives their business is machine learning and technology to work out how to deliver seamlessly to the consumer. And if you think about a world where people start to order via voice, Amazon Alexa, how do you actually disrupt that purchase, and how do you get a new brand in front of a consumer? Because more and more people will have bought a brand before and they'll just add that into their basket as a repeat purchase. So it becomes much more difficult than it did in the retail world, where you would have the opportunity along the aisles, on the gondola end, with point of sale posters, with promotions on pack down the aisle. It becomes a lot more complex within the digital commerce world to think about how you shift behavior or how you introduce new brands. And one way to think about the DTC world, which is an interesting one, is to think about, well, probably we will find that consumers won't want 400 different direct-to-consumer brands in their repertoire. Like one that delivers the mattress, one that delivers personalized dog food, one that delivers healthy snacking food. What will happen when we get to a stage when actually DTC gets to a maturity? Will there actually need to be aggregators, a bit like Peapod and Instacart, that actually sit as a layer above that actually make the customer experience easy again? Right now, we're at the stage where customer experience is often so poor in categories that a direct-to-consumer can come in and very quickly improve the proposition for a customer. So some of you will know this, but I'll share it anyway. DTCs are generally built differently. So they are focused on excellence in one product. Again, whether that's mattress or healthy snacking food or dog food, they don't very quickly move into a portfolio proposition, which means that they can focus. And I think we all know that businesses that focus, startups that focus on one thing, can move quicker than a business trying to do 5 or 10 things. They clearly own the relationship with the customer directly, but they also build very flexible relationships with the supply chain, with the factories, or in many instances, they actually create the product entirely themselves. So if you're tails.com, you actually produce personalized dog food yourself. You buy in the ingredients and then you have your own plants where you create that. You personalize it based on the technology inputs that consumers give you, and then you ship it out. The Hut Group is another good example, based out of Manchester. They essentially manufacture the products like protein supplements, like beauty products that they sell via Look Fantastic. And then they have built in-house marketing capability that is strong in performance marketing. So they pretty much own the entire supply chain from production, marketing, customer experience, which means that very quickly they can take learnings from one part of that supply chain and take it back into another part. And it also means that they have data across the whole piece. So they can use analytics very cleverly to work out where the friction points are and where they need to change. D2C brands obviously cut out unnecessary middlemen or fat very quickly, and they have agility in their DNA because of that data analytics and the technology and the dashboarding that sits within these businesses. It means that every decision is based on data, and they are ultra focused on customers. And I know every marketing organization says they're ultra focused on customers, but you're not until you've actually discussed it with a D2C. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that customer experience is the be all and end all when you're in a direct to consumer brand, and customer reviews and customer feedback is the lifeblood of the whole organization, not just the customer success team or the customer review team. So on the left hand side here, you'll see a quote from Steph Douglas, who is the founder of Don't Buy Her Flowers, which is a D2C gifting proposition. So she contributed to a report that we did on the D2C space, which I can give you a copy of later if you're interested. But what she says is, we try never to assume what the customer needs. We test, develop hypotheses, test again, and then once the customer starts to interact and we see their behavior, we then change it. Now, that all makes sense, right? But it's the execution of that strategy that is the important thing, not just talking about it. The same thing with reviews. Every single D2C that I've interacted with is ultra focused on how well their reviews score on Trustpilot and FIFO, reviews.com. And they will share those reviews, every single one of them, on Slack with the whole organization. To give you an idea, Tails.com, the CEO, James Davidson, who's a great guy, he gets every review come through to his inbox and he still comments on them. Even though there's 2,500 per week, he believes it's important that he can still do that. Probably gets to a point where that's unscalable, but it gives him a real pulse on what's going on within his business. And it means that everybody within the business is close to the customer. So there is proximity between the marketing and the supply chain. Customer feedback's important, but there's also this kind of deep analytical focus on how you can remove friction. If there is friction in the process, can you remove a step on the website? Can you think about how to deliver something in a quicker way by changing the distribution? Because if that customer is unsatisfied or dissatisfied, a D2C will think about how to solve that rather than just report on it as a metric internally and try to improve it over time. They will act on it almost immediately. And there's an interesting story from Tails.com, which I think is one worth telling as well, in that James fundamentally believed that in order to deliver a personalized dog food proposition, he needed more steps on his website to ask questions and to get insight about what the dog, the issues the dog had. Was it a problem with their hair, with their diet? So he added in what was a very complex user experience. Every single UX agency he met told him that wasn't going to work and that he should reduce it. He didn't believe them and ran it. In actual fact, they find that 95% of people are willing to give that data because it's about a dog that they love. And they're then able to create personalized proposition, and their retention rate is exceptionally strong as a result of actually capturing more data rather than less data. So again, it tells you the importance of data and personalization. DTCs are also very much built for agility. You'll see here Jake Newbold, who runs the digital marketing team. He was telling me when we did this report that he has his CFO on Slack. So he has got 3 metrics he needs to share with his CFO to unlock new budget. And they have a system whereby as long as he shares those metrics and he comes in at a certain ROAS, then he can unlock budget within minutes. I don't think there's many big organizations that can unlock new budget to seize opportunity within minutes, hours, let alone days. So that is an advantage. And you'll see Andy, who runs all marketing at Otti, the mattress company, talk about the fact that once they saw that customers were not wanting to buy because they didn't have enough time to consider whether the mattress was a good fit, they extended the trial. So they saw more people were not actually responding to their ads, and they extended the trial from 12 weeks to 6 months, which is something that most businesses would see as a risk and probably be too risk averse around. But Otti, as a result of it, saw their customer acquisition start to go through the roof. So bravery and using data to inform smarter kind of routes and seizing opportunity is another clear behavior that D2Cs have. And of course, they do approach marketing very differently to bigger organizations. They tend to have T-shaped talent. So they won't necessarily just have a paid social person or someone that does PPC. They'll have people that have ability to move between performance marketing channels, do a bit of UX, dig into Data Studio. And the marketing structures are much flatter. Data informs practically everything that they do, although interestingly, activating on customer data, which I'll talk about later, is only now starting to be looked at. They are performance marketing gurus. They're also experiment gurus, so A/B testing gurus. Their way of building marketing capability is in-house as a default, unless they choose not to build that expertise. So it may be something that they don't believe that it's worth them building, or the expertise is complex, whether that's TV or creative. But most self-serve platforms within digital, they will have a crack at doing it themselves unless there is a reason not to. They will max out pay-per-click and paid social until they have every pound of opportunity done. And they will look at blended ROS. They will look at LTV very quickly because they've got the customer data. They will start to predict the profitability of customers from just that first purchase and then use that to feed back into their customer acquisition modeling so that they can make the decisions around, okay, we may be able to acquire customers quickly, but are they customers that are going to stick around for the next few years? But that approach will only take any brand so far, as many of you will know. It doesn't really take into consideration the role of brand awareness and consideration. It doesn't really take into the role of the mid-funnel, the reason to believe. So the top of the funnel creates the awareness. The bottom of the funnel is where DTCs really pay most of their attention. But you can only harvest what you've created, and the demand is limited if you're not creating it all the time. And then lastly, DTCs are increasingly starting to think about measuring lift and incrementality, not multi-touch, because it really only matters if you see an improvement in the overall sales and incremental sales, and then you can make a decision around whether a new channel or a new tactic is working, not based on whether you've just re-attributed some conversions that were already there to another channel. And this is a way that I like to think about, I guess, the different models for driving growth. On the left-hand side, you have businesses that are D2C, so very strong conversion at the bottom of the funnel, but don't create a lot of demand. Don't invest beyond that limited pool of buyers. They will have limited long-term growth. On the far right-hand side, you'll have what is often more traditional businesses who are experts at creating awareness and consideration, i.e. strong levels of demand, but maybe poor at the bottom end of the funnel, poor at performance marketing and poor at converting. Their website maybe doesn't convert as effectively. That means you'll have limited short-term sales. But the nirvana is to be in the middle, where you have the right amount of awareness and consideration media that creates the right levels of demand. And then you have exceptional performance marketing skills and strong website conversion and mobile conversion. So you have sustainable long-term growth. Getting to that nirvana is often more difficult than many brands estimate, but it is a place that you can get to. And there are many D2Cs emerging, although it's not by any means the default, that are starting to do this well. So I would call out brands like Tails.com, Eve Sleep in the mattress space, and Oatly, who are beginning to understand the relationship between brand building and sales activation. So this chart is actually a chart from two great marketing effectiveness people in the industry, Grace Kite and Tom Roach. So it shows you that in those early days on the far left, you can get scale up and growth from always on sales activation, but you hit a barrier and you can't grow any further beyond that. When you start to include the right type of brand building that's selected, that creates that halo and drives through to sales activation, you then start to see that growth comes from the brand building indirectly, although with higher cost per acquisitions and CAC, and from the sales activation as everything starts to work more effectively because you've got consideration pushing people through the funnel. So this I guess, ratifies the importance of bringing together mixed media modeling, things like econometrics, and measuring lift and incrementality, so that you can see that as you start to introduce new brand media, how is that actually driving incremental activity through the bottom of the funnel? Now, one area that I think it's impossible not to talk about when you talk about D2C is Amazon, right? I mean, and there are two schools of thoughts from this, really. There are the folks that want to be everywhere and be available where their customers are. And there are the D2C folks that don't want to surrender control of their brand and data and invest in Amazon's advertising to get there. So I'm just going to play a short part of a video from the seminar, the webinar that we ran, linked to the D2C report, where you'll hear Siobhan from Grays, who runs all customer acquisition, and a couple of other D2C brands
just
talk
want
about
to be available everywhere that we can be. So if you're a loyal Amazon customer and you're purchasing on there, we want to make it easy for you to get Grays. We don't necessarily want you to have to adopt a different routine for you to purchase us. And I think we've seen, as we've introduced, so we've launched into retail, we've launched Amazon, we have an online shop, we've got subscription. We've never noticed any immediate sort of negative effects of cannibalization. We believe it has been incremental.
We've actually stayed away from it so far. It's not to say we won't change our minds in the future. I think there's a few other DTC brands that have done the same. I was reading, I think it was Wayfair, Nike. I know they've kind of stayed away. I think for me, the the cons is it's maybe more difficult to build brand, and you don't really own the relationship as well with the customer. But then on the other side, obviously you get the mass reach and distribution.
We all know, I won't bore you with listening to my comment. I just wanted to give you a flavour of that. And where are DTCs focusing right now? So many of them have attracted new audiences during lockdown that they didn't have before. So they're mining a lot of that data to work out how they can go after those new audience cohorts. They're leveraging their LTV data to build audience prospecting plans so that they can go after profitable customers using data and technology. Many of them are testing pop-up retail and innovative short-term rental agreements as they see shops shutting on the high street. They're going in negotiating short-term leases. They're looking at their audience activation capability linked to the first point to work out how do we plug into a DSP to then go and find more audiences like this. And there's a lot of experimentation going on with different types of TV. Obviously, you've got reduced CPMs on linear TV, but increasingly connected TV is gathering pace. And that really suits a D2C because they can be very data-driven and only focus on the audiences they want and not have the wastage that they don't believe they need. So summarizing this, I would say that D2Cs have an advantage of being able to bottom-up plan and zero-based budget more easily because they have less fixed costs and they can move more quickly. Bigger businesses obviously have fixed costs that need to be amortized over several years, whether because a lot of D2C brands are quite liquid with investment, they can move more quickly to seize advantages, whether that be spinning up on Amazon, whether that be pop-up retail, whether that be unlocking new budget when everybody else is cutting budget during lockdown. And those bravery behaviors and those adaptable and agile behaviors really do help them grow. And I think there will be, at the end of this lockdown, there'll be some quite scary numbers in terms of customers lost to D2Cs if other businesses don't respond quickly. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about what I call the missing part of the funnel. So you'll all be familiar with this funnel. To me, retail-led businesses generally have started at the top, built awareness and then focused down, whereas D2C businesses have started at the bottom and then built up. But often this middle part is forgotten. You've got the TV end at the end, and then you've got kind of performance marketing at the bottom end. But actually reaching audiences and starting to nudge them, give them reasons to believe and push them through programmatic, addressable TV, programmatic display, video, out of home. A lot of those areas are often not thought about or are not invested in, and it's those that drive incremental behavior if you're measuring things correctly. So I would suggest that the way to think about building from the bottom up is to use data to inform how you layer on channels on top of the performance marketing channels if you're a D2C. And even once you get to the top of the funnel, you can still use data on what works in the other channels to inform how you buy TV, how you buy out of home, and how you buy print differently. And I know that the specialist works particularly are very good at this, but a lot of media agencies will lazily buy traditional media channels without really using data to inform who are the audiences with the propensity to convert. And the last bit that I'll talk about is the data and tech piece. So I'll build this out so you can see it. Essentially, once you have strong first-party data, you should be able to augment that with second and third-party data to try and identify lookalikes, people that are very similar to your most profitable customers, people that will likely come back. And if you then are able to connect that into the supply on the demand side using either a data management platform, which is predominantly cookie-led, or increasingly a customer data platform, which is ID-led, where you can execute personalized activity across all channels, then you have the ability to scale the audiences you're after from the data that's collected in a really precise way beyond what is done within channels like paid social and PPC. And in the middle, what we often see is that there's these customer profiles, but they aren't orchestrated. There's no segmentation technology. The advertising tech pipes are not connected up. You need to connect the CDP or the DMP together with the pipe so that you can then go and buy those audiences against the platforms that you want to. So we're seeing that identity to resolution and connecting CDPs into DSPs is becoming a real focus for these e-commerce DSP type DTC, too many abbreviations, types of businesses. And this isn't just about digital. I know that there's been sessions on connected TV in this forum before, and connected TV is gathering pace. You'll see right in the middle there some data from Samsung from their smart TVs that reveals that actually nearly 42% of all people watching their watching content on their TVs are watching less than 2 hours of linear TV. So what are they watching? They're watching increasingly more OTT, and they're watching the equivalent of what is called connected TV. And if you build your data and tech stack, the reality is you then have the ability to build this next generation of media planning where you can take your various different data sources, plug them into a data management or customer data platform, build out profiles and segments, then work out the right creatives. And increasingly, we're seeing businesses doing that themselves with a dynamic studio in-house or a crowdsourcing platform, and then plug both the profiles and the customer data and the creative into a DSP, and then buy across any channel you want, not just the expected channels, digital, desktop, tablet, but also digital out of home, also digital print, also connected TV, and then start to take all of that analytics back in. So this nirvana that's been talked about for a long time is now becoming very possible. And what helps you win in here is log level data. The walled gardens will never give you the level of data to be able to understand exactly what attributes within an audience segment are working. Whereas if you can get down to log level data, as you can with the open web, that allows you to really work out precisely what works and then take those learning back into the walled gardens. So very last slide, because I know I'm slightly over. Key takeaways: putting the customer at the center of every decision is very different if you put a D2C lens on it. Don't forget the mid-funnel. Don't focus on last click or multi-touch. Focus on measuring lift and incrementality. If you're not already investing in data resources and owning the data, really think about how you get to that log level data and how you can use that to win. Think about your technology plumbing, how your MarTech and AdTech connect together for the addressable future, and get ahead of the pack with connected TV now, because the D2Cs will be all over it in the next 6 to 12 months, and it will grow, and there will be better opportunities to convert audiences. So it's important that businesses start to get engaged with it and learn the skills now. And if you want a copy of the D2C report that actually fed into this, then give me a shout, or you can jump onto our website. And there is also a podcast that I run called Time for a Reset, that interviews a bunch of D2C brands, but also senior marketeers on how they're resetting their view about marketing. So I will breathe and allow Mark to step in, because I think we're going to do Q&A now.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate that. That was fantastic insight. I'm scribbling down so many notes there to make sure that the questions are answered. And every time I wrote a question down, you went on to the next chart and actually just decided to answer that question for me. So I think the first thing is that there's a lot of information in there. So actively encourage people to get in touch with you to find out more information. And when we send the emails out after this session, we can definitely give links to that for you. So there's a lot of questions that have come through, and I'll try and get through as many of them as I can. But if anybody else right now, we've got 15 minutes left. If you want to ask a question, please throw it in and I'll make sure that we ask Paul. So a couple of questions that have come through, which I'll link together. So a few people have mentioned TM Lewin recently during COVID announced that they were closing all of their stores in the UK and becoming an online brand only. And I'm linking that with the second question, which is, do you think COVID lockdown has accelerated D2C brands or just provided a convenient blip whilst retail stores have been shut?
No, I do generally think it's, you look at the statistics at the beginning, the behavior was shifting towards convenience, better customer experience, i.e. e-commerce anyway. And look, we've been talking about the demise of the high street for quite a few years. So that wasn't a new trend either. Clearly, I think it has meant that certain investors or PE firms or whatever else will have swooped to take opportunities, because there are some stories where actually businesses have been bought, assets have been bought and connected to an online only proposition, as much as there are examples of businesses that have been closed down. Unfortunately, there will always be some folks out there that will use the backdrop of economic downturn as a reason to do things. But undoubtedly e-commerce behavior has accelerated. I mean, I think we all know that our parents or that generation are now doing more things than they had previously. Behavior is changed in 60 days. I think that's the general behavioral science rule, is it takes 60 days to create a new behavior. We've been in lockdown for 90. So new behaviors have been formed, and some of those will be reverted, but some of them will continue. And if you suddenly find that you can get something delivered quicker to your house, and some of the DTC businesses have actually adapted to allowing you to click and collect or get it from a local pickup point rather than having to be home, then it works even when we're not out of lockdown, that it's a better way to do it rather than always having to rely on going into store. So I firmly believe that e-commerce will continue to grow fast.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because through the last 4 months, the DTC clients that we work with at the Specialist Works, we have seen a real increase in their sales for obvious reasons. And we know Tails.com very well, and a number of clothing brands, home delivery services, etc., have all actually had to close new subscriptions in a number of cases simply because of this. So, but let's crack on with another question. So there are two things that you brought out of that, which I'll try and again link them together. You've said 20% to 30% DTC by 2024. Which sectors and categories are leading this? And conversely, which sectors will always need a retail outlet?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got asked this the other day by Retail Week, actually. It's a good question. So, look, I think that there are categories like, let's take a category like auto, which obviously it's pretty important at some point that you have some kind of physical interaction. But you're even seeing some of the auto manufacturers enabling click to buy cars and test drives to be done from people's houses. So when consumer behavior is forced, when consumer behavior forces a business to realize they need to do something to stay relevant, then suddenly they start to look at these things. I think that, the spaces that are obviously really driving this are kind of beauty, fashion. They continue to grow hugely. And you could argue that a lot of people would have said, well, I still want to try clothes on. I don't want to buy them through online. That's been, that myth has been busted. Again, the myth of I'm not going to put all these details into a website so I can get personalized dog food has been busted. There are quite a lot of cosmetic surgery businesses that are doing online consultations now that have changed their model, whereby the quality of the video that they use means that they can still look at people's skin and they can give them advice rather than not having a business. So isn't it interesting that when you're forced to do something and behavior is forced, that suddenly innovation comes out of that and businesses find new ways to do it? So I think every category ultimately will go more D2C. I think there are some where you need some interaction, but finance, the branches stayed open, but branches only stayed open for a demographic that is very old because the community side of it, and they're used to going in. Once that demographic becomes, I don't want to say dies because that sounds awful, but once that demographic is less important, why do you really need to go into a store to do those things? It does require some of these businesses to change their processes, but I think digital transformation was forcing some of that anyway. Lockdown will have accelerated that.
Yeah, no, and I think, we work with a lot of advertisers in the older cohort that are targeting those and that demographic. And the learnings that we've had through that is that the majority of them have been forced into digital take-up and digital transformation. And actually the biggest growth in percentage terms of the audience doing D2C actually has been the over 60s, simply because of that. So, but anyway, more questions because they're coming thick and fast now. I'm going to link two more together because I think they're roughly the same question. A lot of D2C brands are new, fast growth, but unknown brands. Mm-hmm. What is the role of consumer rating and honest peer feedback to provide brand trust is the first question. Mm-hmm. And I think the similar question, which is about Amazon, products purchased via online ratings, consumer need, fit and price are normally decided on in Amazon by brand. So will there be more aggregators like Amazon instead of retail stores?
Yeah, I alluded to that. I'll take the second one first. I alluded to that briefly in the beginning of the presentation, where I said, well, if you've suddenly got 300-400 D2C brands, what consumer wants to go to each of those websites with a different password? And it's going to become quite painful, right? Unless there's a real differentiator. So I know I keep coming back to Tails, but Tails has built a beautiful community where there is care and friendship in the relationship, not just a product. But I would say most D2C brands are still just trying to exploit the fact that they can sell cheaper product directly to people rather than building the community. So community becomes really important. And I do think you will get some aggregators. I can't see that you won't. I don't know what they'll look like, but I think we've learned that wherever there's complexity, a new marketplace steps in. Wherever there is maybe the ability to get a better deal, an aggregator steps in. Insurance, utilities, we've seen that happen time and time again. So why not? And then on the first question, I think reviews do play an important role, right? Because obviously Google search, Amazon search is how you may find new brands, but brand search is a really important thing. And brand search is basically an equity measure of your top of the funnel activity, in my opinion. It's not talked about in that way too often, but it is an equity measure for that. And Google has started to talk about that recently. And that does require you, as some of those charts show, to invest in the top of the funnel, not just in having good reviews, because an aggregator, like an insurance company that is not very well known, but has the cheapest price, how many people are really going to select it unless they've seen it and have some credibility? They either need to know somebody else that bought it, or they maybe need to have seen your ad in a media that they consider to have stature. That might have been TV in the past. Maybe it might be other media these days, but they need to have seen it somewhere else to have confidence, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what I take out of that is the role of personalization, of localization, and the role of what I loved in your presentation was around D2C brands tend to focus on one product and one product only, but do it very well. And that it seems to be the key, at least the starting point for building these brands up.
I think your point that focus on personalization, focus on the audiences that have the most value for you, focus on the right things that will drive that. I think that's a real benefit, right? I mean, most organizations get themselves caught up and entangled in too many priorities. It happens time and time again, and it slows businesses down. Whereas D2C e-commerce brands, if you've got a scalpel and you're solving a very specific problem with a scalpel rather than trying to be the entire emergency services, it's a lot easier to get stuff executed, not to think about it. And I think the speed between opportunity and execution in a direct-to-consumer brand is like hours or days. In a corporate, an enterprise is often weeks or months. That's where you lose. That's basically where you lose. You've lost straight away. So next question. I'm conscious of time, and I want to get all of these in that we can. So I think this is a great question, especially with your previous history of running a traditional media agency. I do that in inverted commas, however we decide to describe Havas. How well equipped do you think traditional media agencies are to help DTCs? And are there areas of expertise where they need to get smarter to help them become more effective? Yeah, I got asked this question yesterday. I did a similar presentation to ISBAR clients yesterday, and I got asked the same thing. I think they're very badly equipped, I'm going to be honest, because there isn't enough focus on agility. I mean, they have the same problems that some big organizations have, right? Too many departments, not enough agility. The capability around e-commerce and on-site optimization is in most big holding groups almost non-existent. They will tell you they have great data assets, but I would argue the data acquisitions that most have bought are not the right data businesses. Epsilon is an email business. That is not the right business to be buying, but Publicis spent a lot of money on it. I think Dentsu Aegis bought a smart business in Merkle that's very focused on optimization and first-party data. That is smart. But I think the problem is the holding companies will need to go through real transformation to be ready for D2Cs. And from the D2Cs I speak to, they want to work with companies that have a deep understanding of real precision kind of log-level data, regional data, understand retail, and can move quickly. And I don't think that is, holdcos are built for big businesses, scale, and global networks. And they're very good at that. I'm not dismissing that. But they're not built for D2C. And I don't think they will quickly be able to adapt to D2C.
Okay. Final question. I think you've answered most of this already, but I do want to acknowledge the question and ask it anyway. Who, in your opinion, are the most promising new companies in D2C and why?
Oh, that's a difficult question. So I'm not going to answer it with a specific name. I think it is the companies that are proving that there are new models in D2C. So what I mean by that is I think you've got some very mature D2C. So Grays, who I know you guys work with, are quite a mature D2C, right? They've been around for 10 plus years. They used it as a route into retail. That's interesting to me. Is like, how do you build a retail business from a D2C business, but in a different way, a flexible retail business? And then businesses similar to Tails.com who are proving that actually bucking the trend and collecting more data and building more steps in the process is more successful than doing it the other. It's those types of businesses that I find exciting. The Hut Group, I think, are brilliant at taking third or fourth place D2C websites, acquiring them, plugging their technology in, their distribution system and their performance marketing expertise. And then within 6 to 12 months, they get it to number one in the category. I mean, I think that is just an incredibly powerful proposition. And they've just got $1 billion more investment in order to do that. I mean, who wouldn't invest in that right now?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, look, I'm conscious of time. So I want to say a massive thank you, Paul Frampton Calero. Absolute pleasure to talk to you as always. And I really, really appreciate that information.
Enjoyed it.
We will share the presentation.
I guess there was people listening because they asked questions, but I can't see anybody or see any numbers or anything. So I'm just completely in the dark.
You and me both, my friend, but I can tell you the questions are coming thick and fast. So there are people out there, I can promise you, that are engaging with this. So for those that are out there, we will share your email address, Paul. We'll share the contact information. We'll share this webinar with everybody so they've got it. And if they want to get in touch, then we'll conduct that for you. So thank you very much. The only other thing to say is that next week we have final interview, fireside chat with Sophie Devonshire, recently joined this month as CEO of the Marketing Society. So very excited about having a chat with her to find out what she thinks are the challenges and opportunities of marketing at the moment. So please join us next Wednesday. And in the meantime, thank you very much. And thank you, Paul.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of the day.